histories, stories to no end. You tell of bloodshed, of heroism and bravery, of wonders from another time. My name is Yaira. I'm a Ramaz graduate and a Ramaz parent, and I'm a grandchild of a survivor of the Kovna ghetto in Lithuania, as well as many concentration camps, including most notoriously Bergen-Belsen, my grandmother Shoshana. To Shoshana, a größten herzlichen Dank für Ankommen. She's traveled here from Mexico City, where she lives, and I welcome her in Yiddish because it's the language I was raised in. As a child, I never associated Yiddish with Eastern Europe or history. It was simply my reality, here in New York. Yiddish was transmitted to me naturally through everyday conversation at home, so the only thing that made it seem unusual to me was the growing realization that almost no one outside my immediate family spoke much Yiddish. It took a long time for me to understand how integral Yiddish is to Jewish life and to my identity. And I wasn't always comfortable with Yiddish, to be honest. People say to me, "You speak Yiddish? Why? It's a dead language." It's not the reaction you get if you tell people you speak, say, Italian. And I heard that so many times that I once actually asked my grandparents, "Okay, when are we going to be done with Yiddish?" There's a Yiddish word, farfallen, and you could say it like with a shrug. And it means it's over. There's nothing to do but move on and accept reality. So even if we acknowledge the loss, when is Yiddish farfallen? And my grandfather answered right away, "How can it be dead if we're having a conversation in Yiddish right now?" I came to understand that Yiddish is the language of a living people, and my grandparents and parents have guaranteed that it will continue to be so, at least during my lifetime. My grandmother has told me of her experiences in the Holocaust, stories here and there when I asked. Her words have left indelible images in my mind. I see her in the ghetto watching her father, who was once an accomplished factory manager, now secretly dividing a smuggled apple 4 ways, a slice for each member of the family. I see her father coming home one day, limping, dirty, and barefoot. He had been beaten, and his hat and shoes had been ripped off. He says the Nazis want to take away our humanity, make animals out of us. But that they could never do. Wir seien Menschen, he'd said. We are human beings. My grandmother has spoken of torturous starvation, of terror, humiliations, and grief. And I said to her once, it's impossible for me here in the 21st century in New York to imagine what any of this was like. And her response was that she could hardly imagine it either. She has a master's degree in sociology. She has read, she has analyzed, and most importantly, she has witnessed with her own eyes. But some things will never make sense. I was raised here in this community to value the need to record and study our history. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs credits the Jewish people as the first group to see ourselves in history, in our own past. We were the first to recognize the importance of knowing those who came before us and that our actions affect those who will come after us. Isn't it surprising then that there is no authentic Hebrew word for history? We have only the borrowed word, historia. The important word in the Tanakh for understanding our place in time is zachor, remember. The commandment to remember, and also its mirror, the commandment not to forget, appears in the Torah 169 times. That's how essential our awareness of the past is in order to build upon it in the future. So what's the difference between historia, history, and zikaron, memory? History is past, something that happened to someone else. Memory is a living part of who I am. History is information. Memory is part of my identity. But how can I remember something that didn't happen to me? After all, the Holocaust took place before I was born. We can turn to the Pesach Seder for answers, where each generation is supposed to view itself as if it was the one who came out of Egypt. The Seder is a reenactment. We eat matzah that the Jews rush to prepare. We dip in salt water to taste the bitter tears, and so on. We try to connect to the suffering of our people so that we may appreciate the miracle of our freedom. But can we really reenact the events of the Holocaust in order to keep its memory alive? We have ceremonies. We build museums. We try to preserve the sites and artifacts and stories because they tell our history, because all of Eastern Europe is our ground zero. And last summer, my husband and I traveled to Poland on a KJ trip to visit concentration camps and ghettos. It's a form of reenactment, in a way. So, we're in Poland, walking through the woods in the outskirts of Tykocin, a town we visited. We're approaching the spot that ended Jewish life in Tykocin. Intuitively, out of respect, we walk in silence. These woods had been a favorite picnic spot for the Jewish community. It was a place they had fond associations with, a place where I imagine they would have built bonfires to sing around while the children played. It's a thick green forest with tall trees that smell delicious, birds, and even the quiet sound of twigs crunching under my shoes is a relaxing noise to a city girl like me. I could imagine Jewish life here, and it wasn't what I had expected to feel. So as I walk, I'm grappling with the paradox of the beauty of the place and the horror of what once happened here. That beautiful spot was chosen for mass murder with obvious symbolism. As in countless towns throughout Europe, the Jews of Tykocin were rounded up one day, marched into woods where pits had been dug by their Polish neighbors, forced to undress, and shot methodically into the pits. The whole town, there were no selections here. So children, parents, grandparents, friends, everyone. All of the town's 1,400 Jews were killed there on a single day. 1,400 people silenced. And there we stand and stare at a set of cordoned-off pits. And after Kaddish and Hatikva, we turn and walk back to our bus. The ceremony was powerful, I'll never forget it. But as we were walking away from the pits, I had the sense that there had to be something more. My reenactment could not just end here. The silence haunted me because before the day of massacre, these woods had heard centuries of Yiddish conversation and Yiddish music. And that culture has also been silenced because nobody sings the songs anymore. Nobody tells the jokes or recites the poetry. Not in Tykocin, certainly, but not here either. I realized that we learn about what happened to the Jewish people in the Holocaust, and yet we know almost nothing about who they were, not as individuals and not as a people. Their legacy cannot be one of silence. I know firsthand from the songs I was brought up with, from the stories and poems that were read to me, and from the expressions used in my everyday life, the legacy of the Jews is one of life, of learning and creativity, and of a language so interwoven with Judaism that its name, Yiddish, means Jewish. Yiddish united all Eastern European Jews, the religious, the secular, the different countries and lifestyles. Even during the war in the ghettos, Yiddish was a unifying force for the Jews. It was the language of all the internal Jewish organizations, the political undergrounds, the theaters, the schools, the shuls. The Yiddish culture itself became a form of resistance against the Nazis. Our language was the one thing they could not take away. So how can I now watch it slip away into oblivion? On Yom Hashoah, I mourn the jarring disconnect between the people we lost and our commemorations of them. I yearn to see tributes that exalt the language, the centuries of rich study, literature, theater, music, and culture that have shaped our Jewish identity. If I view this day as historical only, I've missed the message of remembrance. If all we do is collect information about the heinous facts of the Holocaust, the people will remain archival data, collected, digitized, and earmarked as crimes against humanity. History does not capture the personal command of Zachor. I cannot reenact the suffering of the Jews during the Holocaust, but I can remember the life and thereby reinforce the legacy. The memories living inside our minds connect us to our Yiddish-speaking ancestors and make a claim on who we are today. My grandparents and parents handed this living legacy down to me, recognizing that the essence of who they are would otherwise be lost in translation. They made an effort to pay it forward, and I offer it to my own children as well, that they may carry their memories with them from the incredible world that we lost. We say Kaddish for those who died al Kiddush Hashem, but in their honor and in their memory, may we revive their voices in song. I close with the last verse of the song I began with. It's not a Holocaust song per se, it's a Yiddish folk song from the turn of the last century by Zabel Zilberts. And the last stanza means, little candles, your histories awaken my anguish. My heart stirs deep within itself and tearfully asks itself, now what will be?